I'm Jaskirt Boora. I'm a photographer and a visual artist and a socially engaged practitioner. I work with communities to tell stories. I'd say very much so I'm a visual storyteller, and thinking about how we can tell stories that are often marginalised in public spaces. The way in which this work has developed for Fractured Landscapes and How We Heal actually shifted a little bit into not talking about their trauma, but actually about their recovery and really focusing on how they heal from trauma. So in this instance, none of the women that we work with or the refugees, we didn't ask them to share stories unless they wanted to. We've focused much more on actually using nature and art as a tool process what they've been going through and what they are going through whilst they're living in refuge, but also giving them space to make and create and give expression to something, a language really of how they can use creativity as part of their healing journey. The way in which it developed was I'd already been working with refugees since 2020, so we were women in refuge, and in 2023 I was lucky to get a DYCP funding, so Develop Your Creative Practice, and that was a catalyst for me trying out new ways of working, both with women in refuge but also for me as a practitioner. It was interesting because at the time I wanted to really experiment with how I could visualise the statistics and data around violence against women and girls, but I got totally overwhelmed with the statistics, to be honest. And then I kind of went to something that was more familiar to me. So I started walking and doing photo walks and taking in and processing all the research, and as well as the research I was reading, also the work I was making with women at the time and listening to their real life experiences of why they've had to escape violent situations. But for me, I wanted to make it bigger. I wanted to make it more of a national conversation for me to develop as an artist, but also to integrate voices from around the country of the experiences that women have. You know, the statistics around male violence against women and girls, just within the UK, you're looking at a woman that dies every 3 days due to that. And the latest figures from the UN Women internationally is 81,000 women die globally because of male violence against women and girls. And I was really super conscious that this is really heavy, but there's this real duality of how the two things can coexist, where you can be living through trauma or have that exist in your life, like you've been through something, and it doesn't necessarily just have to be applicable to women that have experienced traumatic events. But when you live with trauma, you also have to live and somehow survive it. So for me, it was a super conscious decision to try and make this as beautiful as possible, as something that is calming, because that's also what we were trying to achieve in the workshops. The workshops across the country, led by 4 brilliant artists, they were all touching on like nature as a point of reference and using that as a point of reference to make work around, to also help people. Some of what Bell Hooks has wrote in her book All About Love, and in the idea of that actually resistance comes from joy, and how do we find joy? So it's encompassing a lot of that thinking as well, that how do we use the restorative power of nature. Within Fractured Landscapes and How We Heal, we've had workshops across the country led by 4 brilliant artists. So Linda Laird has worked with Oasis in Gravesend. She used the idea of cyanotypes and working within nature to make photos, and made a collaborative quilt as a result from that. We've had Lynn Weedle, who's worked with Safe in Sussex in Worthing, or Littlehampton specifically. Because where they were working was by the sea, they would go for photo walks, they worked with macro photography, they made some images with pressed flowers, but also with slide film. They did some poetry. So they really thought about how image making, but words and text as well, and having conversations can be a part of expressing how they felt. We've had Audrey Albert, who's worked with Chrysalis Centre for Change in St Helens. They did a variety of photo walks. Women brought in objects that were meaningful to them, and they would photograph them, but also made cyanotypes too. And we've had Katie Sadler, who's worked with Birmingham and Solihull Women's Aid. She used craft, so sewing, painting, that kind of crochet making, that kind of art form. In the workshops, women were given an opportunity to make artworks in a whole different variety of ways. But really the focus for each artist was to think about what skills can we bring, what that the women can learn. And then also one of the really revealing things was, for instance, Katie said, it was those small opportunities for the women to make decisions. When decisions have been robbed from you, then suddenly being asked to go, actually, you have a choice here. You can make this or make that, and make those choices, and incrementally how that often also builds confidence in them when they're seen as valued, and their opinion is valued. You can live with trauma, but you also can find beauty in the world. These things are together. When you go through something that's a traumatic event, it's not necessarily on your body for the world to see. Sometimes we hide those things, or sometimes it's mentally, like you're processing what you've been through. And so that idea of actually you have to look a bit harder, or they're not on the surface, that actually you have to look into some of these images to see it, or some things aren't quite as obvious necessarily. Like these look like images of landscapes, and then you look a bit closer and suddenly you see that they've been crumpled, or they've been ripped, or there's been something that's altered in them. Is purposeful to kind of speak on that language of actually, we might all look okay in our daily lives, just walking or doing our daily activities or jobs or work, but we all carry things around with us. Like this isn't something I find easy to just put an Instagram post about, because actually it's something I feel like you have to come and all those layers aren't necessarily easy to read on something that's 2D. It's not so easy to kind of show the women's work in conversation with my work and the text and all the other different layers. It's obviously being in the exhibition is the right space for it. But that's also, I guess, a reason why I feel like I could be more expansive, because when I knew this work was going to be exhibited, when Deborah and I had the conversation, I was like, right, well, I can really think about how we can make this more than a photo book or some of the prints I've put in refuge in the past. How can I tell this story, which is multi-layered, it is complex, but within a space that actually breathes and allows for it. Having the work in the New Art Gallery Walsall is really, it's an amazing moment for me. Having this dedicated space to something I've been working on for a long time, for the last 6 years, it's so special. And being here as well in the Midlands feels totally apt. In Walsall specifically, like there's a lot of significance to me and my family. And so that also feels very full circle. And I never thought it was on my horizon, if I'm honest. It was only when, Deborah Robinson said to me, she goes, send me an email, Jaskirt. I was like, oh, okay then. It was just not in my mindset that I would show in a gallery. It wasn't something I was ever pursuing necessarily. And then it's happened, And I think that's part of also working with people like Deborah, and the New Art Gallery Walsall, who are real champions of local artists, but also national conversations that are really important around themes that I'm making, but more widely as well, contemporary issues. So yeah, it's amazing. Everybody that's come into the exhibition space has just automatically gone, and I want it to be that space where people feel they can spend time in, to really take it in. And those that want to read more, there's more material for them to read and learn and understand. There's books in the space. There's books I've been reading that I've bookmarked and highlighted pages of. So if they want an opportunity to just sit in the space and kind of go through it at their own pace, they can, because that's also part of the work. We've spent 2 years making this. We've been making it in a way in which has taken notice of, but also taken into consideration that this work needs time. And so I also would love for an audience that come here to be able to feel like they can spend time in it without it being overwhelming, without it feeling like it's too much and they need to run out of here. Because, some of the subject matter is heavy, and I appreciate that. It might not be for everyone, but I feel like for those, I would really like it to speak to those people that feel like it gives something back to them, and for them to want to spend time kind of absorbing it, but leaving the space maybe a little bit lighter, a little bit more understood, or being able to kind of take something away from it which helps them, or it helps their understanding maybe. Even if it makes them go for a walk in nature, that's the thing that they get from it. That's a win for me.